Yeah, so you're
Okay.
just saying, things you
I'm
used to
I'm
do when you
okay
started
with that.
climbing.
You can use this information and disseminate it however you'd like, Eric.
Cool.
I
Cool.
but anyway, going back to the different platforms and the things that are available today, it's wonderful. I mean, I so appreciate and enjoy, and as far as shameless sharing of my interests and exploits on the platforms. That might be too strong a characterization, but it's fun. It definitely affords people, and it's a wonderful way for people either to connect or to share information or to just get psyched about the whole thing because I mean it's wonderful in that you can just if you're going to an area and especially with an app like Kaya, and I would imagine there's probably other apps that are set up now that we can use them on our phones and things like that. But for a while, I mean, Mountain Project has been out there, but you have these resources that are available online and they're greatly appreciated. I know that sometimes people can have either concerns or sometimes consternations about these different approaches and means of sharing information. But I guess I've always felt when it comes to sharing information, I mean, you can either decide to utilize it or not. I mean, it's not as though, I mean, you can go out and have an adventure out in the woods in the mountains or in the boulder fields, and you don't have to use any of these products or means of discerning what's up. And especially something like bouldering, I mean, it's you're usually climbing on small enough formations. It's pretty obvious. You just go and you look at the rock and you can see the holds or seemingly the lack of holds. And then you go, okay, there's chalk here. So there's probably something that's been done maybe. But
Yeah, and so you said you started climbing in the 70s, is that right?
I did. I grew up in North Carolina and you're from back east as well, correct?
I'm from Maryland, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, but I grew up in North Carolina, Eric, and I started climbing, well, probably before rock climbing and climbing on rock formations. I think as with most kids, as far as climbing in trees and on jungle gyms and structures. But then my parents, they had this ramshackled cabin up near Hanging Rock State Park. And it's a section in the Piedmont there where there are some nice quartzite bluffs, probably principally Moore's Wall and that area being one of them. But there's a number of just nice cliffs up there. And as a kid, my folks would take my brother and I up there and we'd go hiking and whatnot. And then by the time I was in my early teens, I was wandering around up there. Sometimes I'd just like take a little bedroll and camp up there. And so by the time I was probably like 14 or 15, I was definitely starting to kind of, let's say, scramble on the cliffs. And then I got into like technical climbing at the start of my senior year in high school in 1977. But prior to that, for like a year or two, I'd been climbing on the cliffs and I came to realize later that I was like third classing up to like 5, 6 multi-pitch routes, and fortunately, nothing of any great consequence happened. I'm sure my parents were probably unaware of that. I know they were, but anyway, and so that pretty much got the ball rolling as far as my interest in climbing from an applied technical standpoint, albeit, I mean, the gear then is somewhat different, especially with like bouldering. I mean, some of the things, principally the foam pads and whatnot, have been an amazingly nice addition. I don't know if I would still be playing the game of bouldering, at least anywhere near as hard as I try to go after it sometimes today if it wasn't for the foam pads. But anyway, I started back in the 70s and have pretty much continued on ever since. I mean, some years less of an involvement and engagement, but generally I have kept up with it. And it's something I just enjoy. I think most people, if we're fortunate, we have things that we just become very interested and enthralled in during our life, and climbing is definitely one for me that is just held my interest. And
Yeah. And so you started in North Carolina and then you've made your way to Salt Lake. Was there any notable kind of places in between?
well, for like probably about oh, 7 years, maybe 8 years, probably not quite 10 years, but there was a period there, like when I got out of high school, I had pretty much in my senior year, I'd already decided I'm not going to go on to university or college. And I thought, as far as like some type of occupation or endeavor that I might do in the future, I thought, well, I would be interested in trying to do fine art or see if I could realize some kind of living as an artist. And I think it's probably a little easier, but it's definitely easier than trying to make a living as a dirtbag climber. But that not to get too off point here. So for about probably 7 years or so after I got out of high school, I was just completely involved in and on that arc of just simply doing the dirtbag track, where I'd work for a few months, save up some money, and then just live in a tent out in the dirt. Spent a fair bit of time, probably in the late 70s and early 80s up to about 85. I bet I spent maybe cumulatively a couple of years in Yosemite Valley. So I was just like living in the dirt, out in the tent with in the campgrounds with other assorted dirt bags, and whether it was in the valley or Joshua Tree. Then I'd be back east sometimes, and sometimes hanging out in people's back rooms or out in their backyard if they'd allow me to pitch a tent. So I would kind of move from the eastern U.S. back to the western U.S. and vice versa, somewhat depending on the seasons. And I spent a little time up in the farther northern states. I climbed some in Wyoming and probably many of the states around the U.S. in the Northeast, but principally back east, primarily in North Carolina, and probably the second most frequented area is West Virginia, and it's pretty close, and there's great rock there. I mean, I've always been impressed by the quality of the rock in the United States. But yeah, I would say all the areas, at least that I have been, hold fond memories, and they're great places to go. I mean, I can remember the first time I went into El Dorado Canyon, I think in 1978. It was like, wow, this place is amazing. I mean, like the Red Garden Wall, it's really an interesting canyon in that it's so narrow and the approach is so kind of nondescript that it's hard to gauge. Like the Red Garden Wall is really a chunk of rock that is much larger than it kind of appears. And most certainly, I mean, Elcat, it's, but anyway, I spent a fair bit of time in a number of areas. In Tucson, a number of winters, just because I found it was one of the more temperate and milder places to be. It was warmer than J Tree and tended to be not as, say, windy as Waco Tanks. But honestly, every area that I've spent any length of time in has treated me well.
Yeah, I'd be curious to hear a little bit about your experience in West Virginia. I live in the River Gorge now, so.
Now, as far as where I'm speaking to you on this Zoom call, where are you right now? Are you in West Virginia?
Yeah, I'm in Fayetteville in the River Gorge.
Oh, nice,
Yeah,
nice. Oh,
just climbing right before this.
well, it looks like it might be sunny there, eh? Or is it? Or
Oh,
at least
the weather's great. It's beautiful out right now.
that's yeah. I West Virginia. It was always a fun trip. I oftentimes would catch rides with friends up there, and though usually, I mean, I did some bouldering, but back like in the 80s, usually when I went up there, it was to go rope climbing, or probably more often than not. Sometimes, like when I was dirt bagging Eric for like probably from about 78 when I got out of high school until at least 1985, maybe 86. At times I'd be like hanging out in climbing areas, but I wouldn't necessarily sometimes do that much climbing, just because when you're just kind of living and climbing a lot, I just felt like I needed these downtimes. And I'm sure it depends on a person's temperament, but I have many fond memories of going up there to the New River Gorge, sometimes with my river buddies, and they'd be into like boating, and sometimes they'd even get me in a boat, but generally water was just that. I mean, I'm a good swimmer, but anyway, the New River Gorge is an amazing area and on so many levels, not the least of which at least for my own person, I think it's some of the better sandstone I've ever climbed on.
Yeah.
And I'm somewhat biased. I mean, I grew up in North Carolina, but and I've lived out here in the Western United States for like 25 years here in the Ogden area. But I think the rock quality, at least in the Eastern United States and most certainly in the Southeast, I think the granite and the sandstone and the quartzite there, it's as good as any I've seen, at least out in the Western U.S. or other places. But that's awesome, and I would imagine there's a fair bit of development going on bouldering wise at the new River Gorge.
Oh yeah, there's no shortage. It's pretty endless here, so we're having a good time.
That's wonderful.
And were you bouldering in the new at that time? What years was it that you were in the New River Gorge?
From like I think one of the probably first years I went to the new River Gorge was probably about 80 to probably 80, probably throughout the 80s.
Yeah.
Because I went there, and then for a couple of years at the end of the 80s, I was actually living down in Greensboro, just living in, anyway, I had a roof over my head, and that was about it. But that said, I'd go up there to the new, as I was saying earlier, with oftentimes some river buddies of mine and do assorted things, or sometimes rock climbing buddies, and sometimes I'd have like climbs that I was like interested in doing, but more often than not, I'd just go up there and kind of hang out and enjoy the energy and do kind of weird things. I mean, I there was a period there in the 80s where I got into like free soloing, and at the new River Gorge, in fact, I came across some photos. I was like, oh, of like, I got into this phase where I was like free soloing on site. And then I thought, to make it even more interesting, I wouldn't use chalk or shoes. And yeah, but I mean, it was up to like maybe about 5-10 free soloing. But still,
Wow.
a total lack of better reasoning and intelligence there. I mean, I hesitate even mentioning about free soloing, even though I mean it's like part of the game of climbing. I'll just say this as not any type of like disclaimer, or I'll just put forward my own views and thoughts there. Personally, I think free soloing is not a good idea. I think if you're at all very thoughtful and exercising any kind of true rational judgment and assessment, it's not a good form of activity. And that said, though, I mean, I still view in kind of a weird, I mean, I guess we all can be kind of have a certain level of hypocrisy, but I like Honnold's ascent of El Cap without a rope. I mean, at least in a strange way, stands as a pretty amazing feat of human athleticism. But generally, doing things that we're risking life and limb and either serious injury or death, there's no real sensible way to support that or come to any kind of logical means of making sense of it. But that said, people sometimes do things that don't make a lot of sense. I mean, I'm scratching my head about Iran. I hope that all works out, but who knows? You know, I mean, sometimes human beings just don't do the most sensible things. But anyway, I always enjoyed going up there, and even one time I even free soloed the New River Gorge Bridge, which was a fun thing.
Oh wow, like from the base.
From the very bottom buttress there, and
Oh
just
wow.
climbing up the girders and everything, and I was totally like, because it's like this core 10 steel that's made to rust. When I got up to like the interstate there, I was like, I had like essentially rust dust all over me, and it was funny because I had some friends. I was actually up there with some river buddies, Eric, and I thought, oh, I'll catch a ride back up. And I had done it early in the morning. And so then I was like catching a ride back north on the north side of the bridge. And the very first car that pulled over, I said, oh, nice, I got a ride. And it was Porter Gerard. And I laughed, you know. And he said, what are you doing out here, Zchiesche? And I said, I just soloed the New River Gorge Bridge. He said, bullshit, man. I said, well, dude, look at me. And I mean, I had like shorts and a T-shirt on. It was all like dust covered with rust. but anyway, I wouldn't recommend that. Foolish, and there's probably certain legal problems that can arise from something like that. I'm sure, pretty sure it's trespassing, but there's probably a statute of limitations. So, but anyway, but bouldering's like an activity that I've always enjoyed, and as I said earlier, I'm super psyched that there's the tools out there, materials like the foam pads, and it's a joy.
Yeah, well, first of all, that's an amazing story, and that's insane that you free soloed the bridge. Really cool. When did you start actually bouldering? And when did that kind of transition happen?
So I definitely, in fact, I came across a picture the other day. I was literally like bouldering on formation down along the Dan River, which is in North Carolina, when I was probably like about 17 or so. But I was definitely bouldering pretty much as soon as I began rope climbing. Like I can remember some of the first times I went out to Yosemite or to El Dorado. Back then, I was up to the gunks a time or two back in the 80s, but I was always interested in bouldering alongside rope climbing, and there was like a handful of people that were also into bouldering at that point in time, Eric. But the vast majority of people, and there were far fewer climbers at that point in time as there are today. And then most of the people that were into climbing were into using ropes. I mean, you had a very small number of people in certain areas, like say Joshua Tree in the winter. You would definitely get people down there that would be bouldering, but and in the valley as well. And in fact, like the first time I went to the valley, Calc and Backer had just done like the first and second ascents, Midnight Lightning, respectively, and so bouldering was there, but it was definitely an activity that was far less frequented and done. But as I said, I was definitely interested in it from the get go, and somehow sometimes I think it's amazing that like my knees and joints and everything, considering how many boulders I fell off before I had pads under me, and and people were definitely into pushing themselves. Though oftentimes it would be flatter landings. You would look for something. Of course, then again, sometimes rationalizing things when it doesn't seem very rational, we can do it. But I think people felt like if it was a flat landing, it'd probably be okay. But I mean, if you're up on a fairly tall problem, you hit the ground. There's enough forces and kinetic energy. But anyway, so I most certainly started in the late 70s when I began rock climbing.
Yeah. And then I'm kind of curious to talk a little bit about, you mentioned having seen the platforms change for dissemination of information about climbing, and it's something that, I'm sure you've witnessed a lot of the contentious relationships that are happening interpersonally between guidebook authors. We face it a lot in with Kaya. It's like this question of who is qualified to be a guidebook author or who has the
Mm-hmm,
right to be the person to put this information out. And you have on the one side platforms like Mountain Project, which it's open source, anyone can add anything.
mm-hmm,
Some of the areas are moderated really well, and it's a good resource. Some of the areas are not moderated at all, and it's very sparse or inaccurate. And then on the other hand, you have print guidebooks, which have kind of been the way historically, which are contentious at times. Even, a print guidebook author comes along and makes a new edition, and the old guy says, "Hey, this is my work, you're copying me."
mm-hmm,
And then we're trying to find how we fit in the balance here, both, giving guidebook authors a space to get paid for their work and continue the work of documenting that takes so much time and effort. Not just with Mountain Project, people are often referencing a guidebook, and so then the incentive isn't there for people to buy the book
mm-hmm,
itself as often if
mm-hmm,
it's available for free online. So then the guidebook authors are out of business and don't have the same incentive to keep doing their work. So we're trying to find, a digital way to have guidebook authorship stay alive, but we're also aware that sometimes that causes interpersonal issues. We're aware that, climbers want to be adding information themselves too, and sometimes maybe the
mm-hmm,
guidebook author doesn't approve a climb or doesn't add things to the guidebook that the climbers want to see in there. And it's like a very tricky ecosystem to kind of make everyone happy. The landowners, the local climbing organizations, the guidebook authors, old and new, the new developers, the climbers. So we've been like, playing with how we work with authors, playing with how we work with the community, how we put data into the world for climbing. But just curious to hear like a little bit of your perspective, having seen so many generations of climbers and guidebooks and data change over time, as to what you think, is the best solution if there is one. We've struggled to find one solution that makes everyone happy.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the question, Eric, and as far as I guess, so I'll just kind of go with my almost like I guess you could say you could frame it as almost like a gut reaction or just my immediate kind of formulation in my mind would be okay with it. I'm pretty much okay with the platforms. I understand that there can be, let's just say, frictions and points of just let's just say frictions and points of just where people feel as though somehow it is not structured in the way that's in their own best both experiences and our own perspectives and our own just kind of means of thinking about the world into most things. And for myself, I guess I view it as, at least fortunately, there's the ability to make potentially a little money at climbing. But generally, I think for the vast majority of people, and most certainly when I began climbing, I mean, the opportunity to really make money directly through climbing was largely non existent. And to some degree, it still is reasonably so, at least directly engaged with the act of climbing. So when it comes to like putting forward guidebooks and this and that, I've put out a few small ones. I just got to mimeograph things, but I think it's more something that a person does as part of kind of an extension of this passion of the activity of climbing and the engagement in this just sport activity lifestyle that we all are part of. And I mean, I can well appreciate people wanting to feel like if there's money to be made, that they should realize some type of equitable, I guess, sharing or compensation of that. But when it comes to like how the information is both compiled, then how it's shared, I mean, I think in this day and age where both the costs of printed materials and just the certain restrictions as far as the availability of it, because like when you have a say a printed piece of material, it can be a printed guidebook to say any type of area, or printed, like growing up as a kid, my father was a newspaper man and a cartoonist, and so newspapers were big, but newspapers have pretty much gone by the wayside today. I mean, the printed page is something that is becoming more and more obsolete all the time. I mean, and so I think that to me, it just seems like a natural way in which things are moving as far as sharing information are these platforms on our electronic devices, phones, etc. And so then I think it comes down to kind of the different people that are involved with either cataloging and describing and coming up with the descriptions for these specific routes, problems, et cetera, in these areas, have to figure out how they're going to dance with the different avenues by which it can be presented, disseminated out into the public. And I mean, it's not as though, I mean, people, when they were making printed guidebooks, and they still do to some degree, I mean, there's a cost in that people have to incur. And it's not as though, I mean, people go, oh, a $50 guidebook, but it's not as though the person that is creating the guidebook and has done the work to compile all of that realized there's $50. I mean, there's the printing cost, there's all of that. So, I mean, I just think that it's probably a pretty challenging arrangement to have it in our minds, thought processes where we're going to think that we're going to somehow make money at it, or that this is going to be our path to really a good income stream. I think that, and maybe I'm wrong there, I don't know, but having friends and people that I know that have done guidebooks and such, it just is not something that generally I think you're going to make much money at.
Yeah. Yeah, my understanding is that, it can be somewhat lucrative for a handful of the most popular areas if you've got, kind of a monopoly on the information. You're the
Mm-hmm.
only it's not good on Mountain Project and that's not taking away from your sales, or there's not a competitor guidebook. And if you self-publish, then you realize a lot more of the revenue versus, traditionally print publishers take, 80, 90% of the revenue and oftentimes actually lock authors into pretty restrictive terms, like saying that they actually own the data, not the author themselves. So I think for some authors, if they do the work of self-publishing and take on the risk of incurring all these printing costs up front, then it can be, a decent living for a handful of popular areas. But yeah, I don't think it's gonna pay anyone's mortgage off.
Right. And it's and that's not to lessen or dispel the importance of trying to realize if we're doing something that has a marketable value that we realize are essentially the worth of our work and time spent. But I think then again, like I said, myself and then the people I know that do it is largely something that we just feel strongly about because we want to share this information and to make it available. And then if you can make a little money alongside it, all the better. But as far as like platforms, I mean, to me, it just seems as though the electronic formats and like say that Kaya app or these different ways in which you can access information, whether it's climbing or whatever it might be in this electronic World Wide Web format, just seems to me the way that it's going. I mean, I'm sure that people will always be possibly making certain printed materials, but they will become, I think, much more of almost an item that you get just almost for the novelty of it rather than for the, let's say, either the practicality or just that. But then who knows? I mean, honestly, when it comes to the dissemination of information, I'm good with it, and by whatever form it takes, and that's probably I can well appreciate that some people feel strongly about different approaches or shortcomings in this structure or that, and it makes me think about and though I'm removed from it enough, I really, though I've heard about a little about kind of the consternation between, let's say, the online platforms and people that are making guidebooks and this and that. It's nothing like the level of angst and energy expended, I think, largely in a confused way back in the 80s when you had the clash between like trad climbing and sport climbing. I mean, that was something that, wow, people literally went to fisticuffs over, where it's just like, holy cow, I mean, let's get a proportion here.
Yeah, I don't know of anybody fighting over guidebooks, but I
That's
wouldn't
good.
be
That's good.
surprised.
I hope it doesn't happen because it sure doesn't merit it. It's sure not worth it.
Yeah. Tell me about Slick 50. I mean, the reason I reached out is, I mean, I've seen your climbing exploits for a long time, and then I feel like I've continued to see photos of you and first ascents from all over the country, and then, thought it was really cool that you were using Kaya, and then saw that you logged Slick 50, said that it was
Oh
your,
yeah,
30 plus session project. So that's pretty
30
amazing,
plus.
and to
Oh,
highlight
God,
that,
no.
congratulations.
Well, I appreciate that. It was thoroughly enjoyable. A friend of mine said, "Well, I'm sure you're glad to get that one done." And I said, "Yeah, it was nice to finish it, but honestly, I would have kept trooping back there." And is definitely part of it, as you well know. I mean, you're a strong, solid double digit crusher, and as you push yourself harder and harder, and everybody winds up with kind of that. Ceiling that you butt against, and when you get there, it's like, okay, how much time? And I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that you have certain things that you probably expended repetitive tries on. Probably have things out there that you're still working on, and I mean, and it's a super intriguing element of climbing, and most certainly, like say, bouldering. I think that's the one thing that has always kind of drawn me to the game of bouldering. Is it's this game that you can play where you just see literally how hard moves you can make on rock. And I mean, you can do it most certainly with rope climbing. And I mean, the routes out there today that are the hardest rope routes on the planet are, as with anything that people are doing on the top end, is extremely hard and extremely difficult. But I would definitely posit that I still think that the hardest moves that human beings are doing, at least on rock, are on boulder problems. I mean, at least it stands to me from my way of reasoning, you're going to be able to execute the hardest moves you can do, essentially a format that's the most easily accessible. And not to say you can hang on a rope a lot, but then with bouldering, I mean, once you lay out your sea of pads or get it arranged, I mean, you're just focusing on the movement. But it's great fun. I think for most people, if you're into bouldering and most certainly pushing yourself, you probably get comfortable to a varying degrees of going back and trying things over and over. I mean, I've got projects out there that have been going on for not just years, like decades. I mean, holy cow, it's out in like Yosemite Valley, and I'm still butting my head against like midnight lightning, but we'll see what happens. I was pumped though, because a buddy of mine, Tim Wagner, who lives, he and his wife live down in top of Big Cottonwood. But yeah, Tim did it this past fall. He got it. Arguably, he's probably one of the older ascents of it. He's 60 years old, and I was psyched for that. But we'll see. We'll see what happens there. But it's fun. I mean, projecting things is fun. Getting up things is fun. Just getting out and running around and playing is fun.
Oh yeah. How old are you, Eric?
65.
65. Yeah. Man, I yeah, I hope I'm still putting 30 sessions in at your age as well.
Dude, why? Well, I mean, that will all depend on your own interests and proclivities. Because I mean, how old are you, Eric?
I'm 26.
Okay, you're 26, so not about 40 years younger. But I mean, honestly, I mean, your parents are both still probably alive, right?
They are, yes.
How about your grandparents? Are they all still alive, or some of them?
No, none of them are
Well,
left.
okay. So I was just getting a little off track here, but as far as like your immediate ancestors and forebears, most of them have lived to a reasonable age, right?
Yeah, yeah, most of
I
them.
mean, in so much, I mean, it's not like you've got like numerous people in your family that are dying in their middle age. I mean, when they're
Right.
40 or whatever. I mean, you're
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah.
So where I'm going with all of this, and I mean, that's kind of to some degree how my brains always work, but I kind of go this way and that way, and sometimes it all leads back. But so you, in all likelihood, and you look by all appearances, and from what I was saying, I try to stay apprised to some degree of the folks out there that are pulling down and playing this activity. And so I'm most certainly aware of your person and your exploits. And I mean, it is super inspiring. I mean, I'm happy to still be able to get out and run around, do it at 65. But to me, I mean, I draw great inspiration from younger people that are there just pulling down and getting after it. I mean, to some degree, I think it enabled me to just kind of keep progressing. If not progressing, at least I don't feel like I've slipped back too much, which is, kind of crazy. I mean, I can distinctly remember like when I was in my 20s or even in my, late teens and climbing. But that's going back to asking your age and then the age of, so in all likelihood, you can expect to get out to, I mean, I would think easily 80, if not, I mean, so just figure you've got at least another 50 years. And chances are you'll have more than that. And then, I mean, chances are you'll probably stay in reasonably good shape. I mean, holy cow. I mean, I see no reason, Eric, why you'll be in better shape when you're probably 65 than I am. I mean, because I think you probably both are probably have a little better sensibilities than I probably did when I was in my 20s. And you probably have both better dietary practices. And I hazard the guess, you probably definitely anyway, but I see no reason why you can't be. And it's my own guesstimate that I think that in another, though I'm probably not going to be around here, well, fingers crossed, maybe another 15 or 20, but in 30 or 40 years, when a lot of the younger folks today are, say, getting into their older years, I think there'll be a lot of essentially 60 and I think very possibly 70-year-old double digit crushers. That's my sense. Because I mean, hell, I mean, I'm still hoping maybe to wrestle up another double digit problem. And but it's by no means it's like when I started climbing and bouldering, I mean, hell, there were only a handful of double digit problems, on the planet. I mean, holy, I had some that like Morrison had put up out there in Colorado, but like I referred to the problem there, midnight lightning in the valley. I mean, that's a mid-range problem today at V8, and yet that was like one of the classic hardman problems of its day, and so that's my sense. I think if you have interest and you want to continue, I see no reason why you will not still be doing 11s and 12s in 40 and 50 years.
Yeah, let's hope. Let's
Well, I mean, I don't know, bro. I will be around, but that's my call anyway. I
yeah.
mean, I can distinctly remember. I mean, in 1982, when I was putting climbing on this new route over on Fifi Buttress, and of course, it could have been I was doing a fair bit of psychotropic drugs then too, but I can remember sitting at the top of a pitch of one of the harder leads I'd done and looking at El Cap, and I can remember thinking, there's going to be free climbs all over this thing. And I got back down the valley floor. I was telling friends of mine in Camp 4, and they just said, dude, you're high, Zchiesche. You're crazy. I mean, and here it comes, 40 years after the fact, and it's pretty much the case, man. I mean, it's like, yeah. And I'm amped, man. I think I'm biased, but I think this is one of the cooler, grander activities that a person can do in their physical body as far as a sporting activity. I mean, nothing against the ball sports or the sports you do with teams and on fields and this and that or the endurance, but I think as far as like an activity that melds together a lot of really cool things as far as our physical attributes and sensibilities and skill sets. It's a badass sport.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the better ones out there. Nice. Yeah, and then I'm also just curious to hear. So when did you move to Salt Lake?
In 2001, so just after the millennia. And
Okay.
I was married at the time, and I moved out here with my wife because she had finished up her studies in library sciences. And so, and at that point in time, I was working the fine arts business, shilling products through dealers and galleries. And I said, well, just see where you get some job offers. And one of them was out here in Weber County. And I said, sure, I'll move out to Utah. And we were living in central Wisconsin at the time. And a number of our friends, I can remember, we were in around the Madison area, kind of a liberal bastion. But they said, you're moving to Utah? And I said, well, it'll be okay. I mean, it's in the United States of America. They've got the rule of law. But anyway, I the marriage didn't last. That happens sometimes. But as far as like a location, I really like it out here. I can pretty much see running out the time I've got left, Eric, here in this area. I really, even though I have a grand fondness to the Eastern United States, and I keep thinking I've got to go back and see. I still have some old friends in the NC area and in the Greensboro area, and I should make a trip back because I think I'm going to go visit my brother and his partner Michael in Atlanta in the fall, and maybe I'll just figure out some way to just I should because it's been over 30 years since I've been to the Tar Heel State, and it'd be fun to and being in that area most certainly in the fall when the color's changing, it's epic.
Yeah. And why were you in Wisconsin? Because that's actually I've been trying to find it just now. I was reminded our author for the Devil's Lake Guide and Kaya is Joel Lidvina, and he was telling me a great story about some, I forget exactly what it was. It's some unrepeated boulder that you put up, some highball sketchy thing maybe, and I wish I remembered the name, but I was just like, man, Eric has been everywhere. Like I didn't know
Well,
you'd spent time there and then you pop up.
I probably lived in the Midwest for about 10 years because after I kind of when I started to move into kind of like the fine arts business, like I got kind of the dirt bagging out of my system by my like late 20s. And so right around like 1990, I moved in with my dad on the old family farm. It was like that was quite a time. I mean, I enjoyed it. There were some challenges there, but both my late father and myself, we were both there in the old farmhouse working on our art projects. And I was just kind of starting to get a handle on kind of arranging it to make a living from art sales. And I was doing a lot of art fairs at the onset there, selling stuff in Chicago and Madison, some of the big fairs. But anyway, so I was living there on the old family farm, and as I said, it was a family farm that had been in my family since my great grandfather purchased the farm back in the late 1800s, and it was a grain and hog farm. And so anyway, I mean, both my dad and I, we're not farmers. I mean, he was a cartoonist all his life, and as far as vocation, a painter and artist for myself. But I enjoyed it on a number of levels, not the least of which I lived there on the farm with my dad, and then he died in the mid '90s. But it definitely I probably wouldn't have spent if that had not occurred that length of time right in the Midwest. But it's a dynamic, super interesting place of the country and the world. I mean, in so much that I mean it's one of the areas that is as far as food production and the realization of food from the ground and from other things. But then when I was up there, I thought, well, there's got to be climbing around here. And then I found Devil's Lake. In fact, well before then, back like in the early 80s, a friend of mine, Bill Russell out in the valley, he said, oh, your folks are up there in northern Illinois. You should go check out the lake if you get up there sometime. And so when I'd gone by and visited them a time or two back in the 80s, I went up to the lake. And so I knew it was there. So then when I was up there living in the 90s, I would go up with some frequency up to Devil's Lake. And it was great fun. I mean, it's like this. I don't know if you've ever climbed there. I wouldn't make any type of real concerted effort or unless you found yourself like in Chicago or Madison and you could sprint out there. It's not like I would not consider it like a destination location. But as far as the rock type, it's got the most impeccable rock I've ever climbed on. I mean, it's like, I mean, imagine like the new River Gorge made out of like quartzite. I mean, it's and it's all pretty much like dead vertical. It's which is at least oftentimes has been a style of climbing that I definitely enjoy. But anyway, yeah, I had great time up there. Got great friends. In fact, I was planning on like going back. I'd even rented a campsite, the group site, this like end of May. And I pulled the plug on it. I mean, I think I'm getting like becoming a milk toast here in my older years. And that it mostly was just like the 1,500 mile drive out there. It was like, oh God, so now I'm like moving to the point where, okay, if I'm going to go any distance, I'll just think about doing it as like a or a plane travel. But anyway, I thoroughly enjoyed the lake, and it's got some great climbs there, albeit, I mean, since a lot of like the harder rope climbs are all done on top ropes. I mean, nobody gets any credit for those. I mean, that's understandable, I mean, and so that actually adds a quality to it because it's pretty low key. I mean, the party atmosphere there can be, or at least was, but I have no idea now. I think my observation is younger folks today have many finer sensibilities, not the least of which as far as like getting their too snail-eyed using drugs or different types of libations, which is a good thing. I mean, it's important. I mean, it's important to have fun and to maybe not necessarily be too much of a stick in the mud about certain things. I mean, experimentation's okay, but the last thing you want to do is wind up, with a meth addiction or in my own case, I wound up with, well, I guess it's described as, alcohol abuse syndrome. I mean, parts of it, I mean, hell, I was an alcoholic, but anyway, at least I turned the corner on that one. I have been sober for over 18 years, which for my own self, that was a good call.
Yeah, congratulations. Nice.
Oh yeah, well, I part of it is I think sometimes when you've got like substance abuse problems, if you're lucky, you stop, and it's largely oftentimes propelled from just nothing more than just kind of like base self-preservation. You realize, geez, if I continue on this kind of program that I'm on, yeah, and somehow it all worked out there. I mean, I was as are too many. I mean, functioning drunks, and I was not a mean drunk, but I was sure a stupid drunk. I was, think of the person with the lampshade on. I mean, just but anyway, as they say, things that don't kill you sometimes will make you stronger. If or not, at least maybe give you a little stronger insight into how to put a better foot forward.
Yeah. Yeah, well, coming up on the hour here, any other things you want to speak to before we head off?
Speak to other than, well, and hopefully, I mean, I appreciate you taking interest, and hopefully this hasn't been too rambling. I mean, sometimes I can collect my wits, but as far as I guess to kind of encapsulate and maybe finishing thoughts on this conversation of like climbing and the activity specifically that we engage in a fair bit, bouldering. I would imagine you probably do rope climbing to some degree,
A
but
little bit.
principally, I know you at least from your online presence and such, as far as bouldering. But I think that at least for me, it is. I just feel very fortunate, blessed, really, to have been able to follow this really passion, this interest that I had at a reasonably young age. I mean, in this day and age, I mean, holy cow, you see little kids out there that are hardly out of their diapers they're pulling down, and it's awesome. I mean, it does my heart good. I to see how this activity has progressed and how so many more people have become interested in it and involved in it. I mean, heck, it'll be this will be the third time it'll be in the Olympics. I mean, it's wonderful to see the collective and community involvement in it, and then to just see literally how much joy it brings people. I mean, to me, I draw so much from the people that are participating in this sport and what's being done. And to me, I mean, it is just a wonderful thing. It's important, and by no means is it something that we should take for granted or just think is just a default mechanism of being, and that to have things that we are very enthused about and enjoy is, I think, one of the more important attributes and qualities and just energies that a person can have, to have things that we just, and ideally, I think, at least for myself with like climbing, it's helped me on a number of levels, not the least of which is that on one hand, it's like this activity that you do that you engage in. You have to be focused and attention to detail and have patience and hopefully not take it. You don't want to take it too seriously. But the I think the better skills and qualities that you can draw from it, you can most certainly move those out into other areas of your life to hopefully make you a more effective human being. I mean, I oftentimes think, and I'm pretty sure, I mean, it seems like, and if not, it could easily be a Ron Calc quote, but I mean, I could remember there was like back in the 80s, and I think someone asked Calc, something about, being a good climber, a great climber. And Ron said, well, more important than being a good climber is being a good person. And honestly, I think whatever we can do or realize to move us in that direction, whatever path or essentially activity or means we have to move us there. But climbing, bouldering's great. And I'm hoping, knock on whatever, knock on wood to do it. Pretty much, I have no intention of stopping. I mean, no, who knows? I mean, sometimes I had an incident back like a couple of years ago where it was like, well, but I mean, I lived through it. I went to the climbing gym. I had a massive heart attack, but it all worked out. And I asked my cardiologist, I said, well, what do you think? I do this activity that's fairly strenuous. And he said, well, you'll be fine. So I guess, anyway, I've enjoyed it, Eric, very much. And look forward to hopefully maybe one of these days bumping into you in person.
Yeah, yeah. Let me know if you come back down to Moore's Wall or the New River Gorge. I'll be happy to show you some of the new climbing that's been developed here.
I would enjoy that. And you live in the Fayetteville area, right? That's a great area, great community, and will you have a wonderful springtime and
Yeah,
pleasure chatting with you, sir.
yeah, you
And
too. Yeah, thanks so much
and
for taking the time. I mean, it was awesome to hear some of your stories. I'm sure you've got much more where that came from.
yeah, and new ones get generated all the time. And well, anyway, you have a wonderful day.